Hey, welcome to the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is my continued video lessons. You can find me at scienceoffantasyfootball.com, on Twitter as well. You can find me there. Uh, part two, of course, so you should watch part one. Looking at predictions, okay, nothing is in stone because I don't have a time machine. So these lessons that I give are what I'm doing and looking at. This is my process. This is what I'm observing. My decisions is what I'm doing. I'm showing you kind of the raw material of that, the findings. It's up to you to decide to decide whether my analysis fits with what you're seeing. We could have different views on how to deal with some of these concepts and things. That's great. If I'm helping you think deeper, then I've done my job on that. So just be aware that what you see and what I may say, it may sound like it's kind of a, you know, line in the sand, ditch to dying kind of concept. It's not, right? It's fantasy football, right? This is showing you how I'm proceeding and things I'm thinking about. It's the end of June here, 2023. So, you know, I'm not going to get serious about drafting my 50 or so teams till August. So things will change. Okay. But I'm putting this out now because I know people are drafting, etc. And this allows me to circle back around and just double check, triple check on what I have found and whatnot. So some of this stuff is going across years and seasons. Some of it's very specific for 2023. Okay, so that's kind of my uh, prologue there a little bit. This is the abbreviations you may see. PS preseason, EOS end of season fantasy points per game. Could be total fantasy points too. Uh, Taking preseason ADP predictions of position. In other words, what is the public giving us? What are they seeing? What happened? Right, following up with the end of the season. And I'm testing that statistically to see is there anything that we can use for 2023. So my database is 2015 to 22. I have Excel spreadsheet data, use pivot tables. I do box and whisker plots for visualization. If I'm testing treatment groups, I'm using ANOVA. And then to see if there's anything worth going forward. And if there is, I use the Tukey highest significant difference test. I use chi-square testing, and I look at current ADP player profiles to see if I can apply what I'm finding to kind of the snapshot here, end of June 2023. See if there's anything worth mentioning, right? Anything worth looking at. Okay. Dealing with wide receivers is the first position. Look at part one. This is Public's ADP view of team WR crew by year. So the teams, Arizona to Washington, wide receivers, and I divided the pie. This is the preseason pie in the top third, the mid, and the bottom third. In other words, kind of the high, mid, and low view of the complete ranked wide receivers. Okay. I understand there's wide receiver one and two. I'm just trying to get a view of the whole crew, right? It's the landscape. People sometimes, I think, get muddled in picking apart one player when you kind of gone past the landscape, right? It's like if you're going to plant a cornfield, you don't look at one plant, right? You're looking at the whole field and trying to figure out slope. You're trying to figure out amount of light, the fertilizer, all sorts of variables. Landscape allows you to look at the whole forest, not just the tree. Yes, we will look at the trees, okay? But we should start at a top-down view. I just, as a microbiologist, a scientist, we deconstruct a system and try to then rebuild it and put it together again. That's how we can kind of figure out what's necessary and sufficient for a process. You've got to do that, folks. Necessary and sufficient. Okay. Saying, what does that mean? Well, if you break down a car, right? If I remove the windshield wipers, really not necessary, is it? Or sufficient. Car still goes. If I pull the engine out, yep, it's necessary and sufficient. What happens if I pull the tires off? It's sufficient because you could still roll on the rims. Necessary to certainly travel the roads, right, and go fairly quickly. So you start seeing when you're breaking things down, you see what's got to be there versus what adds to the system, makes it more efficient, better. Okay, so we've got to figure that out. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. So here's just looking at the teams. There's some data here, right? Just kind of look. Last year, look at was it the public really loved Carolina. They loved Cincinnati. They loved Denver. Who else? They loved Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Seattle, San Francisco, Tampa Bay last year. So at Minnesota, no, Minnesota was mid. Miami. Okay, so a lot of those teams I've just said are kind of still in the mix this year. So I didn't look year to year. In other words, is there a predictive value you can look at the year before to predict how the public's going to see this year? I suspect there's carryovers. Obviously, not every player moves between teams. There is stability in teams. There is movement. Okay, that's probably something I should look at down the road. See if there's any edge there, right? I'm looking for an edge for myself, and you're getting to come along for the ride. Okay. So we talked about the total wide receiver crew. Now let's get deeper and look at the ADP view of a team's wide receiver crew versus now, instead of the crew's average, the wide receiver one's average by year. So you'll notice each year, and I divided by a black line here, we see what the public thought of the whole crew, and we see what the WR1 for that team did. Okay. And we can kind of see, right, what's going on. Okay. Now, the WR1 is not end of the season WR1. It is preseason, end of the season scoring, but it is the preseason WR1. Because, right, people can get injured. Wide receivers can get injured. So all we have for 2020 is the perceived WR1. So now this data is the perceived WR1. It's just the points are the end of the season points. So you need to listen to that to see what I'm really doing here. Okay? Because you can see, look at last year, some of these fantasy points, say for what is this? Baltimore, 7, almost 8. That doesn't sound like a WR1 to end this. I know this is, right? This is the predicted WR1. And this is what they earned. Here's Diggs in Buffalo. He was predicted WR1, 19 points. That's good. So he came through. Okay, so you can see some came through. The top third in green, the bottom is in red, and no color is mid. So I actually colorized the fantasy points per game. So perceived complete crew, what does the public think? Top, mid, bottom, and the WR1 predicted preseason versus end of season scoring. Okay, you really need to write that down and think about what I'm doing. You've got to juggle that. Okay, so I'm trying to generate a study that we can use now for 2023. And the good news, next year I'll have another year data, and we can then use for 2024. So, and of course, in our diary, we're going to see, is any of this us at all, right? I can have a lot of data here, but if it doesn't put money in my pocket by winning leagues, then it's a lot of work for nothing. Okay, so that's what this data is. So this is showing the 8-year public perception of the crew, bottom, mid, and top, and each team's predicted WR1 and their end of season scoring is shown. Okay, so it's not all green here, it's not all red there, so there is some variation, right? Data like this is never clear cut. If it was clear cut in fantasy, you wouldn't have to do these studies. Everybody would just be knowing it and doing it. If we then take these 3 columns and consider each group, the perception of it as a treatment, right? And then we look at the scoring fantasy points of the WR1s, we get this box and whisker plot. Okay, really neat. Teams, WR1, preseason, and I should come in here, help you, preseason. Preseason versus their end of season actual scoring compared to the team's view of the wide receiver crew. Makes this bottom, mid, top. WR1s from the bottom, top, mid, and top. Okay, so public says this is the best of the best, and note the average here, 15.6 fantasy points, the mid 14.2, the bottom, the public perceive a weakness in the complete crew 11.7. So if there was not a difference, they'd all be the same, the boxes. We don't see them. I didn't know what was going to happen. So you'd say, well, it's obvious, better team. Yeah, but what's the variation? Is this real? See, that's what stats allows us to ask. Is this by chance over the last 8 years, or is this really real? and can we apply that? Okay, this is great data. I'm very excited. Look at this. And look at the highest here, 23.6 over the 8 years from the best teams. We actually had an outlier, 25, from a mid team. That's kind of interesting. Notice the bottom here, the bottom whisker. Okay. So you want to see a complete WR failure, WR1 failures, wow, from the lower predicted teams. 1.6. You think that's, here's a couple outliers. Notice the higher teams, you get a floor of 5.6. Saying, well, that's still, I understand, but it's better than these. Okay. And this is even a little higher. This is the one to worry about. So when you're drafting a WR1 predicted on each team, just be aware if the crew itself is being perceived as sucky. There is, look at the variation here. Look at the range. There's got to be a lot more uncertainty here. And you should really try to get the best draft capital usage of any WR1s from these teams. Is this data real? Let's use an ANOVA test. Treatment 1 is the low, mid, and high WR1s. Here's the, and I guess that was the median that I showed the number, my bad. Here's the mean, 11.6, 14.1, 15.6. So there are some differences. The top and the mid teams, the way the public is viewing preseason, closer, look at the bottom. Man, that ain't good. Is there something going on? Yes. ANOVA says, notice this is in blue, the F stat, 7.7. The F ratio is 17.7. The P value is less than. It's basically no way that this is random. It is significant. This data, the ANOVA says it's real. There's something different here. I understand we can predict differences. Are these two different though? Well, everybody no, not everybody knows anything, right? So here we go. Bottom versus mid is different. Bottom versus top is different. Mid versus top is not different. So, yeah, I could predict that. Yeah, but look at the value, 0.07. We set an arbitrary 0.05. This is damn close. If I had 16 years of data, we might find that this is significant. But I have samples. So we're going to treat these as the same. Okay, ANOVA says, and the Tukey testing says, treat them as the same. But treat the bottom as a problem. You are losing around 20 to 25% on average difference in your WR1 into the season. So you're drafting, if you using those teams and drafting on average, you are risking 20, 25% loss versus WR1 predicted in mid and top teams. That is on average. There's always an exception. Okay. But man, this is kick data. Okay, folks. This is action. People talk about, well, it's actionable. Folks, this is as actionable as I can give you. Okay, without some Monte Carlo and other kinds of simulations. This is great, mate. Love it. I'm excited. 19 minutes. So let's go through the, I think this is the bottom. Okay. So the bottom teams are in the brown red right here. I think end of June 2023 average of the crew. So there's the break right here. Denver, Indianapolis, Cleveland, Rams, Atlanta, Tennessee, New England, Arizona, Kansas City, Carolina, Houston, Giants. I lined up to predicted WR1s on each of the teams. Okay. And you can put them into groups here. So, Cooper and Old Cup. Cup is at 3. Doesn't mean Cup won't produce. Telling you, this data is suggestive that you should definitely try to get as much value. If you're sold on Cup, then 3 is awful high to be pulled out of this group here. The public is really concerned about Matt Stafford. You could ignore that. Hey, it's your team. I'm telling you, it adds uncertainty to his 2023 season. I know on Twitter there was controversy. Cooper's another one. So those two to me seem awful risky at their price, awful uncertain at their price. Notice I didn't say Cooper and Cup won't be outliers, right? This is on average, right? Across 8 years. This is the best I can do. I think the next group that there is no color code, Tony, Jerry Judy, Pittman, London, Burks, Marquise Brown, seems to be about right. So you don't want them at price. Take them below price. Still adding uncertainty. The ones that intrigued me were Juju, Thielen, Collins, and Jalen Hyatt. You're saying, well, those kind of suck. Yeah, I understand. 47, 56, 63, 65. What I highlighted there and I said are interesting is it looks like the price is low enough that you might this uncertainty could be baked in and might be worth an investment. Certainly not your WR, but a 4 or a 5, that's catching my attention. So I am using 8 years of statistical analysis that has been shown by ANOVA and Tukey testing to be significantly different in how the public is perceiving the crew versus the WR1 perception and what happens. So I'm worried about Cooper Cup and Amari Cooper. So the Coopers I'm worried about. Excuse me. I'm looking for Schuster, Thielen, Collins, and Hyatt as maybe low enough in the ADP that it may be worth a stab or two. I mean, you don't want them at price, but those are some of these deeper ones that might give us something there. Okay. So on average, if you look at 50% of these guys are predicted to fall, and this is this is wide receiver ranking. the 17th wide receiver to the 44th. So the fact that Schuster's at 47 seems he's fallen below that, and 56. Those are the lower end, so you're kind of getting that as a baked in price. They're so low that it might be worth our time, right? You might get more than you think you're getting. Okay. So that is, I've gone full circle with the complete application here. Okay. This is the mid teams. Public is not enamored, but they think they're better than the low teams. Diggs, I put him at the top. Bateman and Deontay Johnson at the bottom. Given the wide receiver 9th to 27th, that's kind of the range, and it looks like Bateman for sure and Johnson is right on that edge that might have the price baked in. The rest of them seem about right, so that means you don't want them at their price. You want bargains. Diggs is always a worry. Fifth, I'm not sure I want to take him at 5. I'm not totally scared of him, but not like Pup at all. But you know, we all want to get a bargain, so I don't know how much Diggs I'll have. Okay, and then finally the top teams. Only thing that jumped out to me in this was Godwin. First to 24th wide receivers, Godwin's going as the 27th positional wide receiver. Look like there may be a little sliver of value there as your what, third. I mean, getting at a third or fourth, then that's a win-win. So I am looking for Godwin for sure after 26 wide receivers are off the board. I'm trying to figure out where is, Godwin's still there. So that is how I used the data and tracked it all the way through. And now we have an application. Is this a great data or what? Yeah. For the few that are listening, thank you for listening. Yay. Thank you. Okay. We will pick it up with lesson 3 because I got more secret stuff to tell you. Woo woo.